It's very important these days to understand that our relationship to money, currency, how we value each other in our relationships is going to be completely revolutionized in the next decade. But I also see a lot of power and a double-edged sword with AI, just like any technology, just like blockchain. Blockchain can be used for great good and great evil. Same with AI. And I think AI is just going to replace a lot of the tedious factor that humans aren't supposed to be doing anyways. And when I say tedious in the modern world, it is that sort of monkey work, right? That people have been doing for and been sort of siloed into by corporations for the last 100 years or more since the Industrial Revolution really kicked off.
Ask yourself really, why are all these changes occurring right at this second? Why didn't they occur 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Why is everything just double, triple, quadruple layered on top of? The amount of change is so staggering at the moment that it's a tidal wave of change, of layers of change, all coming in at the exact same moment. And you might want to ask yourself why. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here on the Adapt 2030 channel. As always, trying to bring you the best and brightest minds, moving through the changes that we're experiencing globally. And one of these is going to have to be, how are we going to communicate if something truly does take down the net or disrupts communications in the normal ways that we understand in terms of internet? We're going to have to think of different ways to be able to intercommunicate within ourselves here. So today I got Mike Winter with me from Qortal.org. And, he's been on the show with Dr. Bear Lando before. I've had him on a couple times. Super, always amazing and interesting conversation about health, longevity, future. How is tech moving in the future? How are we connected to this tech moving in the future? And ways that we can leapfrog, not get dragged along like we have been for so long, but to leapfrog in disruptive communications. We were talking about disruptive energy devices on the last show in terms of Tesla technologies and magnetic motors using the Earth's magnetic field, etc. So many different ways to take the conversation, but Cordal, Qortal.org, Qortal.org. And I'm interested in learning about it. I see it as the future, and I thought I would share. So Mike, thanks for coming on with me and walking a newbie through it just so I can understand it, and then hopefully others can get it. And, it's just a different way for us to stay in contact if something were to happen.
And I will preface this, and thanks for having me on, David. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. You've been a big influence on me in terms of understanding the larger macro cycles of the planet in relation to not only the cosmos and essentially how climate really works, but also in terms of how the history of humanity has been affected by that through cycles. And I'd love to get into a little bit of some cycles today with you later on, but there's some other ideas I have had of late related to that and the Kali Yuga and things like that. But that being said, Cordal with a Q, like portal, but with a Q. For us, the big Leviathan we're facing isn't necessarily so much a power outage. Yes, there's potentiality for that, of course, but that, in my mind, even if it's a year-long power outage where we have chaos, I believe humanity can find a way to get that back. For us, the bigger Leviathan, the scary sort of tyrannical thing we're facing is more so the complete overhaul and censorship of all communication for the future of mankind forever.
A surging national debt is bullish for gold. The debt ceiling drama ended with nominal budget cuts and a shiny new credit card with no limit for the federal government. The first business day after the U.S. Treasury increased our national debt by $350 billion. It's no wonder Google searches for how to buy gold hit record levels in 2023. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Also, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer 6 years in a row. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
And what I mean by that is centralized, technocratic control using social systems that are targeting individuals through a sort of a panopticon of censorship, and also, of course, constant spying and control of how we relate with each other. And in that way, sort of the frog slowly boiling in the pot strategy, right? Where, and I hate to use this N word, but normies out there don't even realize anymore that they've given up. I mean, we're basically there already, David, but they've given up every sensibility of human dignity and privacy, so that there is no longer any sort of humanity left. And those few that are trying to still tell the truth and wake up the masses have no ability or chance to do that, because society, Brave New World-esque, doesn't even care anymore. And so for me, that is way scarier than a power outage. But I don't think they want that. I think they're quite happy with the slow rollout as it's going, as we go into central bank digital currencies and social credit scores. And we'll get into how the Bank of International Settlements announced, I think it was early this week, their plan for initiating the CBDC. And I do see a lot of problems with it. But that being said, Cordal was initiated over 8 years ago with the knowledge that this is what we were facing. And it really stems out of the cypherpunk movement that was inspired in the 90s as a means to use encryption and these sort of P2P, person-to-person technologies to counteract this large surveillance state, this large panopticon, as we like to call it, right, of centralized technocratic control. So Cordal is really the sort of the spirit and the overall, I don't know, the drive that came out of like the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. That is what Bitcoin came out of. So what is it? It is a complete person-to-person infrastructure designed to replace the World Wide Web. It's based on a built from the ground up code base that uses a consensus, its own unique consensus that, and we'll go deep into this because I think this is one of the most powerful aspects of Cordal, that is not based on your typical proof of work or proof of stake, but rather, my father's showing up to the house right now. Always the worst timing. So my dogs are going to go crazy. Sorry. My parents just moved up by me, David, up here in the mountains. So I'm quite fortunate to have my family here. But of course, he always comes right when I'm in a let
him join. We'll all say hello together. We're talking about an entirely different internet system from stem to stern. And that's what I was really talking about with the ability to be able to communicate. Was, our ability to communicate can be cut at any 1 second here. I mean, with the DNS centralized and ICANN and everything that's interlooped in that centralized control net there, if they don't like what you're saying, they can cut websites now. So, how do you keep that communication going? I should have explained it a little bit better in the opening of, that's what I was getting at, is that your ability to communicate can be cut at any time. Even if things are still functional, whether we have power or we don't have power, it doesn't matter. They can still cut your ability to communicate. And that's interesting that even back in the 90s, cypherpunks understood that it was getting a little bit too risque back then in terms of control of flow of information, even in the 90s. Now think about that. We were 30 some years ahead into the control web and the funneling of information of what is allowed to be seen or not seen.
Well, I mean, look what happened in the 90s. We had the creation of the World Wide Web. And who is your favorite guy, David? Al Gore, pushing that forward. And Sir Berners-Lee, who has some interesting connections to royalty and the sort of elites. They saw that the original, even though it did come out of DARPANET, and it was very much a military industrial complex creation, the original internet, it still had basic protocols that could be used, that were open source, that could be used for, what these cypherpunks intended. So they saw the need and they marketed it as more of just convenience and as a use case for the average person to be able to access the internet, to essentially siphon off, or excuse me, to silo the users within a sort of corporate sphere of access, right? So that's when you first had the AOLs and CompuServes and all of these different internet providers, internet service providers come up that now allowed for a lot of people that never thought about using the internet to use it. But what it did is it took out the ability for the free spirit sort of original mindset that the internet was supposed to be, which was supposed to be sort of this like Wild West egalitarian space where we could have total freedom to connect and do commerce and communicate without the restrictions of certain commercial or corporate interests. So Cordal's trying to go back to that, because you're right. ICANN, that controls the domain name, the registrars. Those are that's a corporation. It's a single corporation that used to be, I believe, in New York, or actually I think in Europe, and it's moved to Silicon Valley. I haven't researched that in a while, but I was shocked when I first discovered that, because you think it would be something that was sort of, owned by the public, right? That was maybe under a trust or something, that the public had, essentially a governance protocol built into it where, it wasn't able to be controlled by individual forces like that. So that is, while I haven't heard of it happening quite yet, in other words, like domains being shut down, that is an easy path for them to take, to shut down people's domains if they're telling too much truth. And I think we will be seeing that in the near future. However, I do know of hosting platforms that have censored and shut down people for sure. I know of email platforms, even those that say they don't, have shut down friends of mine in the health freedom space, especially with like email. It's pretty wild, like Proton Mail, right? They're supposed to be this really privacy forward facing company. And I know of 2 or 3 individuals that have had their accounts shut down, not that their emails were read, but their accounts were shut down due to who they are. So obviously email.
Proton Mail.
Yeah, Proton Mail.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is a shocking statement.
Yeah. So once again, the ability for us to have an open pathway to communicate digitally online is crucial moving forward. Of course, we have things like you said, where we can go back to lower bandwidth sort of modalities. Those are a good backup for local communication. But I believe that if we don't have the ability to communicate across the world, that is very much playing into the strategy of isolating and sort of allowing them to pick off those who are sort of leaders in movements. And I think that's how they were always able to do it in the past. When you had like the 60s movement, the Back to Land movement, not only did the CIA and other 3-letter agencies interject their own nefarious agendas to, to take out those certain movements with certain drugs and other ideologies, they were able to target leaders and then isolate them, because we didn't have the technology back then to have mass communication instantly like we're doing right here. So I think it's really important to have that. And also, I think in conjunction with that, having your local community, right, where you're resilient and you have your own supply chains and you're growing your own food and you have different people with different skill sets in your community that can do the things that aren't required to go out and rely upon the larger supply chains, the more global supply chains. So I think that is the way to move forward, is to have worldwide communication, but then also local resiliency in your own community.
Yeah, and it is that slow burn that seems to be getting a lot of people, the way it's perceived is there's this one giant event that's going to happen. And it does seem that the thing that is grinding on people is never, you're almost at the edge, but it never gets there. Never again. It's just next and the next and the next steps of, can you remember back in the day when you would buy something, there was no tax online. And then suddenly, that was a way to communicate and do commerce and business conducted peer-to-peer without tax, and suddenly whoosh, something had to step in the middle. And even with precious metals before, when you buy things online, precious metals, gold, silver, whatever, there was never tax. But now all these states have implemented precious metals taxes inside the online purchase space, you know. So where do we bring it back to again? Because now they want to grab $600 if you know, you have to file if you transacted $600 or whatever. It's getting to the point where there definitely has to be something different out there for communications and as well as business, barter, trade. Because when it does come down to it, the way, you know, a lot of people envision it, we're going to have the step over to central bank digital currencies. You can partake in the system or not. It'll be up to you. But if you don't, you're going to have a different system where there is some value of trade, some fair value that's associated with product A or service B. That's going to have to be interswapped between people. Now, you know, carrying baskets of food around, we live near the Amish, so that's quite the possibility of trading, you know, 20 pounds of butternut squash for, you know, a dozen eggs or a chicken or something. But when you start to move a little bit further outside that arena, then really what becomes something that is of value on an agreed upon value, you know, there's a lot of things that are going to need to be overcome during this time because that control net is going to get much tighter. And here's another thing I was told. Well, if you're not going to accept the central bank digital currency because you don't have to accept their food stamps or their food ration cards because you're growing your own. Now, they're going to be targeting those people who don't want to get on the system because that means you have already stepped outside the system and you're able to operate without their deliveries, and you don't need the actual quote unquote system as much anymore to rely on, where, you know, you get a whole family, like, you know, mother, father dragging their kids down to get signed up, and who knows what hoops and hurdles we'll have to, you know, get in through. I mean, over the last 3 years, just to even go into a store, what was required for you to access food?
Well,
what do you think is going to happen with the CBDCs at this point, and how does that all interplay into, you know, privacy in a society, I guess?
Well, the green agenda is a major part of this too. Like, of course, they have multiple facets that are planned to work in conjunction together. So in the green agenda is obviously, we see it targeting, you know, larger farmers in Europe and in other parts of the world due to carbon emissions and all that. And I see them using that sort of ideology to target the mom and pop backyard gardener by having potentially even drones roving with sensors and scanning for your outgassing of CO2 emissions. And if you hit a certain level, then here you go. You get, if you're on the system, you get a green slap, you get a carbon emission slap on your score, right? And that will, of course, affect your overall score to be able, on your wallet there for your CBDC. So once again, yeah, not being involved at all, but still then how else can they cut you off from the system? Whether that be if you rely upon, and I'm not a fan of the you know, the medical complex out there, but if you do rely upon that for certain medications or services, they cut you off from that. So, you know, it's really hard to be completely independent from the overall system. I know a lot of people want to believe they can and do that. I have a chiropractor, my chiropractor here, who I think you may even know, is one of the most sort of resilient people, independent people I know, but still he relies upon going to Home Depot here and there and doing his business with folks that have to have a regular job to pay him to go to get his chiropractic services. So it's idealistic to believe we can be on a completely parallel system, but I also think we need to be realistic as well. And the one thing I will say we have going for us right now is the psychopaths at the WEF and these globalists. I think they've overplayed their cards a bit. And I do think there's going to be massive issues with the CBDC because of the centralized nature of it. And they think that they can just roll this out and not have hacked issues with the currency. But the whole reason why Bitcoin was invented was to solve the double spend problem. And so if you're going to roll out a massive worldwide digital currency, I already know, and I've heard this from multiple insiders, and I don't know if you know who Cliff High is, but he's been mentioning this, that there's a lot of chatter on the dark web, but people like rubbing their hands, hackers can't wait for them to roll it out because they're going to hack it and they're going to create billions of dollars out of blue because they know how to do that. And the whole point of something like proof of work, or what Cordal does, the minting, is to counter that, right, through a ledger that is decentralized and has a consensus that doesn't allow for double spending. How do they stop double spending right now? Because quite frankly, we do have a digital money dollar system for the most part. We do have cash still, and it's, they call it the petrodollar, but there's, a lot of fraud out there in the system. Who counters that fraud right now? Well, it's your bank, right? It's whoever issues you whoever has your checking account that you're using, if it's a debit card, or if you're using a credit card, it's the credit card company. If it's cash, well, you either get robbed or you get suckered, right? But you're not going to get hacked, right? You can't hack cash. However, you can easily, there's a lot of fraud that goes on in the credit card industry, right? And basically the people backing that are the banks. Well, the banks aren't going to be playing a role with this anymore. It's supposed to be going through Fed and Fed Now and the BIS. And so how do they have the power to manage this? I think it's extremely audacious. I don't think they have the systems set in play. I think a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And it's going to be really interesting to see how long this actually takes to implement. It makes me think of, like, remember how we were told we were going to have self-driving cars by like 2022? I remember being told that in Los Angeles, downtown LA, this was like 2018, by 2022, you wouldn't be able to drive manually into downtown LA because the self-driving systems were already being partnered with the major automobile companies, GM, Chevy, Ford. We're all getting partnerships with Lyft and Uber, and it was all going to be automated. And you weren't going to, and there was people freaking out about this, literally, because I was living in LA. I left in 2016, but this chatter was even going on back then. People were like, there's a part of the, the impetus, the motivation for me to move out to where I am now, because I didn't want to be part of it. Well, what happened with that? The self-driving cars were blowing up and malfunctioning left and right. And it seems like we're much farther away from that than they proposed. And I think they do this a lot as literally a sort of a scam to the markets, right? So they can scam people and cause the markets to go up and down and make a ton of money off fake bad science. It's a lot of grift out there, man. So I think we should keep that in mind. The CBDC rollout, it's going to have a lot of problems, and I think it's going to be more on the commercial sector for a long time before it becomes sort of something that's ubiquitous in people's lives.
Yeah, I'll tag onto that. And, if you've been following any kind of rollout happening in Africa, Nigeria specifically, they had an uptake rate of 2%, but the government, in its infinite wisdom there, destroyed all the cash, thinking that everybody would uptake it instantly. So they had Himalayan mountains of shredded bills of all denominations, and it just didn't work. And it ended up the most unsafe place to go due to the rioting and the destruction of buildings and property and targeting of executives and bank workers and those in the legislature, that they had to call the army out. And that's just in Africa. The dismal uptake rate was 2%. So now the government finds itself between a rock and a hard place of going, all right, nobody wants to accept this. We don't have enough cash. We can't print enough cash to re-inject cash back into the system. So they're just kind of riding between the fiery nights and the days where cash is not available. They've really gone back to a lot of bartering again. Bartering only goes so far. They're really stuck. This shows you the vulnerability of moving too fast on it, and really the uptake of it with the technology that lags behind on everybody who would have access to a phone or a mobile phone or a charging station if you're living further out. I mean, in Africa, I could see why they'd roll it out there first, because it's a difficult place to roll it out. There's not a lot of access to the tech that actually would allow you to access and use that. But at the same time, it was such a cash-based nation. They're almost trying to try it on purpose in one of those cash-based transaction nations in Africa. On top of, there was just I think it was an experiment in a petri dish myself to see what went wrong, the things that could be improved on in terms, they probably did a full analysis on everything, and it was just a test, knowing it would fail. But what could they garner from that? And now take that lesson learned and then bring it into a more developed nation and try to roll it out.
Yeah, definitely what we call stress tests in technology, right? And you want, when you're doing a stress test, you ramped up all the different variables to something that's way out of whack and what you'd have to deal with just to make sure that you can handle that. So yeah, they initiated this into, like you were saying, a kind of chaotic environment that is definitely more second world, and still a tiny economy though. Like the economy is probably equal to the size of like the Orange County that I grew up in, it's like, so yeah, it's, for me, I've come to the point to where I think a lot of what we're seeing that's being proposed by the World Economic Forum, like ESG and all this, is just grift in a way, and a means to launder money to mafioso type organizations and cabals, right? And I think the greed's going to be a massive part of their downfall. And I do believe that we're seeing it fracturing. I believe we've seen over the last, since COVID, the fracturing of the sort of globalism supply chain that was set up after World War II with the US Navy. And I also see massive problems in the demographics with a lot of these countries we're supposed to be fearful of, like China. They have serious demographic issues. I say one thing that's going really good for the United States is we've got pretty strong demo in terms of, we still have a very vital younger generation coming up. That being said, I do believe there is a large fracturing of the global sort of elitist system. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, whether they're going to try to funnel this into a World War III where it's sort of a Christian right versus Islam. I know that was always the plan, right? And we know they pre-planned World War I and pre-planned World War II, and those did happen as they had planned. But I'm wondering if this World War III fizzled on them. And I would say that because of the internet, because of our ability to have more of a mass awakening and be hip to this. I mean, it's very obvious, David, within the last 20 years, I mean, the general sort of narratives around stuff like New World Order and PSYOP and all these terms. If I mentioned that 20 years ago when I was first learning about it from people like David Icke, I was seen as a nutcase, like crazy conspiracy theorist. And now you go on Instagram and I just scan on like my reels and every other one. And I know it's the algorithm playing into my interest, but it seems very mainstream now. People talking about this sort of stuff. But I will say, I think why, circling back to Cordal, why it's so important is we can, really help stem the tide of this globalist plan through communication and helping each other, sharing information as fast as we can on our own internet systems, like you do every week on your show.
Let me throw something at you. Just before we got on air today, you and I, there was a news flash that came across from RT News that said it's official now that the new BRICS currency is going to be a gold-backed currency. Now, again, you can do some auditing in terms of reserves of gold. You can't really double count it, especially they're going to be really on it. It's going to be a blockchain-based open, I guess, ledger for knowing how much gold is in reserves in individual nations. And that's why you saw this last month, 8 more central banks back the truck up and pick up gold and just move it in. So you either had the gold or you didn't. So when you're talking about the inflation rate minting here with Cordal, like okay, there's only a certain fixed amount of gold, and that's there and that's spendable within the ecosystem of this new BRICS currency or backing with resources. So tell me about the inflation rate or minting, quote unquote, that would be with Qortal. Like how, because we've seen a lot of projects come and, suddenly, they go from having some value to how many of them have never, I don't care if you bring the paddles in and charge them up again, they're never coming back. So where's the value lie, or where's the value stem from if you're going to be using Quart. I mean, I'm just asking.
Yeah, this is a great conversation to get into. And sorry if I keep spiraling off on all these other topics.
No,
But
because they're so interconnected. See, that's the
yeah.
whole thing, is how interconnected it is and how necessary it is to have at least a different internet system or something that allows, like I say, this communication in case this corporate controlled entity behemoth that controls the airwaves and the lines across the planet. We're going to have something different that has real value and backing behind it, that can have some pegged and perceived value that's worth using it and continues to grow in value every time it's used.
So I do agree that deflation is very much a tool to use against the WEF and the banking elite. However, it does come also with its own issues. That being said, like, there's a certain amount of a hoarding mentality that can come about when you talk to gold bugs, and a fear that comes around that. And while I'm not a Keynesian by any means, I abhor a Keynesian philosophy of economics, which, is John Maynard Keynes, who's sort of the philosophical ground basis for mainstream central controlled economic system, right? Which is more about the idea of using capital spending to drive an economy, not savings, and to use debt as a means to increase overall GDP and all that. I get that, but there is some value to understanding having a liquidity in a market because people are spending and active using the currency, and that's something Cordal is focused on. So there is a slight inflation rate that is actually maintained by the code base. And I think this is an important element to understand when we're talking about something like blockchain, and why I get a little triggered and question the idea of pegging a blockchain to a physical good, because I don't know of any way to do that right now that doesn't have an element of centralization. And what I mean by that is, in order to peg something to a gold, that means you have to rely on an official, someone of officialdom, to guarantee that that physical gold is being counted correctly, that it's in the vault, and that it's been correctly attached to the blockchain ledger, right? There's no way that I know of right now that you can decentralize that. There has to be some sort of audit done, which requires a trusted source to do the audit. And this is also why I have problems with dollar-backed cryptos and stable coins, as they're called. And we've seen the problem with stable coins. They use all sorts of little games and tricks and different sort of accounting measures and stuff to supposedly have that one-to-one peg. And we found that that's not true. And it opens up to a lot of problems. So the Qortal's main ethos is pure decentralization. And what we mean by that is everything on the code is the entire economy, and everything in the project is controlled by the code that's open source, by the consensus that's based purely on time, or really proving yourself and your effort and your worth over time by how you support the network, which we call minting. So that being said, to answer your question, it's all in the code base. So we literally have hard coded the inflation rate to it's variable. So it changes every year based upon amount of blocks that go by. It goes down, and then when it hits a certain threshold, the community once a year votes if they want to bump it up one, or is it? I have to look in the wiki. It's been a while since I've looked at this. I think it's either 1 or 0.5% up or down max. And the community votes on that. And how's the community vote on that? Based on their weight of their level, which they've gained by over time. So there's a leveling system in Cordal, which is purely based on how long you've been running a full node supporting the network. The more blocks that you proved over time that you are supporting the network, you bump up in levels of trust. It's basically a weight of trust based over time, and then your voting capacity increases as well. So this is a great way to counter spamming the network, counter inequity of like what you have with proof of work or proof of stake. For instance, proof of stake that has a lot of voting systems is based on coin, like how much coin you're staking, which you can buy influence, where this is purely based on time, where everybody's basically starts at the same level, except for the founders. The founders started at a higher level because we put 7-8 years of our life into developing the network. And that was a way for us to make sure that we could oversee the launch and protect it, because we had a lot at stake to make sure it went well. But over time, even someone who started a year ago will catch up with the founders. It's designed that way so that there will be a parity over time. So as someone proves themselves minting over the next 3, 4, 5 years, they will catch up with myself and become what we call like an elder in Cordal, someone who's put the time in to prove themselves. So to answer your question, yeah, it's all in the code base. And I'd much rather have that than a commodity that is really driven by all sorts of different other liabilities, other weird derivatives, also, natural disasters, when it comes to gold, mining interests, national interests that can control access to mines, also large gold deposits that we don't even know about, like who's controlling this legacy gold. We heard all these rumors about Nasara and Jasara and having like all this gold hidden away. And where was that, Vietnam or the Philippines? Like there's a lot of interesting stuff around that. So yeah, I think this is sort of a very Aquarian notion of currency, right? This is that Bitcoin kind of was aiming to do, but Bitcoin definitely has a little bit more of that old school mindset around gold and deflationary, where Cordal does have a bit of inflation. And my ideal is like, 0.2% inflation is where I'd love to see the network end up. So it's just enough to spur people to be spending it and using it and having more value on the relationships they have, the services they offer, and the goods they offer than hoarding for the future. But that being said, there is something really powerful about having a deflationary currency as well. So maybe that's something that could be in parallel. That's like a savings coin or something for the future, or the idea being that we start doing stuff of quality again, so that our homes are built of quality and not these, the modern home, which is built on the debt system, which is built to only last, 10 years before it has to be rebuilt again. So that's for the future generations, right? But that being said, yeah, so hopefully that kind of answers your question, David, and we could share the wiki page that shows how that inflation voting works too, if you want.
Yeah, and I'd like to, since I downloaded the Qortal over onto my desktop here, I use the Windows version of that. Curious how to get it set up and get the username set in there. But with that whole Gasara and Nasara thing, I'm just shaking my head, just going, is that another one of those? Okay, don't do anything. Somebody else is going to come to save you. Your economic plight might be bad now, but don't worry about it. It's going to start. The next system's going to start. It's going to start. Don't worry about it. Don't take any of your own energy to go try to solve the problem of these inequalities, or what we can see in terms of banking and centralized power. Don't worry about it. Somebody else is going to take care of it. It's the same this whole thing with white hats and this, and next week it's gonna, next month it's gonna, and it's these two things running in tandem of hold off, don't do a single thing. Somebody's coming to save you. And it just seems like, what we've seen these programs run before again and again. I'm just not down with that. If you're going to try to change the world, we're going to have to do some action with it. You can't just sit back in a chair and, some gold's going to magically come out of whatever hole in the ground and they're going to reset an economy. Are you kidding me? It hasn't done that in 6,000 years. And then suddenly, okay, there's some new Aquarian energies. I understand. That's a Birkeland current coming through and things are going to vibrate faster and move faster. So the way you perceive reality is going to change and bend. I get it. They're going to have a different system. They're going to have to change governance structure. The way our economy operates is going to change. The way you perceive reality and another human and another soul in the body is going to change. The physical in front of you is going to change. You might see things different. And when I say that, things that are popping in view of turning a dial like you would on a radio station, But the world we're seeing and being marched right into is the same changes of faster energies that we are now starting to experience. So, of course, those who know the cycles are going to have to move the society with it, but still try to maintain control as the vibration frequency ups itself. So sorry, I digress. I'll go back. Yeah, I would
love
love
it.
to.
Dude, I love when you go deep into the more metaphysical stuff because you're so good at it. And it's very important these days to understand that our relationship to money, currency, how we value each other and our relationships is going to be completely revolutionized in the next decade. Look what AI is doing right now. I just saw this, every day I see a new video about what AI is doing to essentially take out whole sectors of the workforce. And I saw a guy demoing using Midgarden and Chat GPT. He created a new, really awesome looking athletic shoe brand in 1 minute with full, examples with logo, full website copy, and all that in a flash. And I assume a lot of branding firms and like marketing firms are pooping their pants right now because those, especially the more like normie ones that are just providing a basic service and aren't thinking outside the box, they're out of a job already. And I only bring that up because I don't fear AI. I don't see AI as becoming conscious. I have a deeper understanding of what consciousness is related to, as you're saying, those currents and the ether and what it means to actually be living, a living, spirit body. But that's not, but I also see a lot of power and a double-edged sword with AI, just like any technology, just like blockchain. Blockchain can be used for great good and great evil. Same with AI. And I think AI is just going to replace a lot of the tedious factor that humans aren't supposed to be doing anyways. And when I say tedious in the modern world, it is that sort of monkey work, right? That people have been doing and been sort of siloed into by corporations for the last 100 years or more since the Industrial Revolution really kicked off. And it was all part of the game that these wannabe elites, were playing. And so this is a freeing technology. I do think Cordal is going to play a massive role in it because Cordal's focus, once again, is on freedom. It's on privacy. It's on the ability to transact in a decentralized parallel system that isn't controlled by this WEF, globalist, cabal. And so it's going to allow people to focus on their vocation, which isn't something Chat GPT or AI can do, because that is innovation. That's the creative human brilliance of the spiritual mind, right? And so if you are going to rely upon Chat GPT to do your copy for your website, it will do a good job for a super, like, very much, mainstream, very much run-of-the-mill type company. You'll get lost right away in the new marketplace that'll be in Cordal, because we're talking about brilliant innovation, very imaginative innovation, and changing technologies and concepts and ideas of what we can do that will get us out of this sort of stale, commercialized, debt-focused world that we're in, of strip malls and McDonald's on every corner and 7-Elevens and and everyone working these like monkey work jobs. We can get back to the true renaissance of being creators and being imaginators and also tying back into the land and getting back into connection with nature, right? While the Chat GPTs of the world do all the sort of basic stuff that we don't need to worry about anymore, kind of like Star Wars. And in a way, it's kind of like what Star Wars represents a little bit in those films.
Yeah, just a quick jump between, ask yourself really, why are all these changes occurring right at this second? Why didn't they occur 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Why is everything just double, triple, quadruple layered on top of? The amount of change is so staggering at the moment that it's a tidal wave of change, of layers of change, all coming in at the exact same moment. And you might want to ask yourself why. Truly, why is it happening? Something more on a vast scale is changing that is going to require an entire new morphology of our civilization. So you can either collapse with it, or you can bend to and, like you say, be the creator of the new. It's your choice. It's always your choice.
So with that, Cordal is the portal into the new world. It's censorship proof, not censorship resilient. And I think that's really important to understand, because any truth teller is running into different walls right now in the digital world. So having that censorship proof is really important. Let me, I'll share screen. The economy side, once again, is so vital, because there are other platforms that provide some elements of what Qortal does, but we want to remember that Qortal is a complete infrastructure platform that has the economy built into it. Let me move the zoom out of the way so that it's all in one. So it's not like right now, if you go to any of these quote unquote Web 3.0 projects, which are still using the World Wide Web, which has all the issues with domain names and all that, they are fractured. They require cross, like all this type of interoperability and all this, but you go to them and you want to use them, and what do? They direct you to a centralized exchange to buy their coin, and then you're like, well, what do I do? I want to start using stuff. So Cordal is about literally like the old school Web 2.0, downloading AOL so you can access actual stuff. So can you see the screen here, David?
Yeah, with the Kali Yuga, yeah, the rising energies are coming out of the Kali Yuga to the Dwapara Yuga. It's interesting.
Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, I have 3 monitors here.
But I like that you're using Brave, because I do the same thing. I use Brave and then DuckDuckGo and try to stay out of that whole. It's really interesting, the search result differences too. I highly encourage anybody to go try a search result difference using Google and then DuckDuckGo using Brave, and then see where it takes you on your results. You'd be shocked, especially on the image results.
Okay, yeah, I have
just saying.
It's crazy, dude. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about search here on Cordal. So now you can see the Cordal platform.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I like to stay in dark mode. You can also do light mode, but I prefer the dark mode. I think it looks better. So so Cordal in itself is its own platform. It's like I was saying, like the original AOL days, where you'd have to download the AOL software on your computer and then be like the G through your modem, and then it's like, you got mail. Well, we've gone back to that in a way. And by doing that, we're not on the World Wide Web. So there's nothing connecting us to the World Wide Web. The only thing that we're currently connected to in the legacy system is through using an internet service provider, and using sort of how the information is packeted and sent across the interwebs. But besides that, this is completely independent, right? So you have to go onto Qortal.org and download this, and then if you can see here on my top of my panel here, this is the core that's running, and it says I'm currently minting with 15 connections. So that is the core software running on the background of your computer. This can work on any computer, Mac, Linux, PC. We have it running on Raspberry Pis. We have it running on, people are running it now on Android phones, but our mobile optimization isn't quite done yet. We've basically, right now, you're looking at an application on it. We recently launched the ability to do what we call our Q apps, which is really exciting, because this is really where we want to go with this as a platform. And so now developers with simple JavaScript can create applications for people in the Cordal ecosystem to interact with, just like your App Store or Google Play Store. So the ones that I mainly use right now are Qmail, Qblog, and I do like the Music Roundtable, which is just music sharing. Now, these are completely decentralized. And what we mean by that is you have to install them on your node here. And then once you do that, you're running it completely off your own machine, and you're connecting with the other peers on the network. You're not routing through any centralized services or any centralized conduits that a lot of these quote unquote Web 3.0 decentralized platforms require. So this is actually replacing email. It's fully encrypted, and it cannot be stopped. So there's no censorship on there. So there's nobody owns Cordal. There's nobody who can, just like the original Bitcoin, there's no corporation behind it, no CEOs, no roundtable groups. We do have a development group that obviously works on it, but the code is completely open source and nobody can go in and like stop you from doing stuff on it. So this is like a basic email platform where you can email back and forth, and it stays on it. Basically, it encrypts and then goes to your machine and encrypts on your machine, and as long as you want it on there. We have QChat, which is sort of replacing like a Telegram type functionality. And so this right now is the general chat, people chatting all day on. This is essentially right now using unconfirmed transactions on the blockchain. So it's not storing the messages on the blockchain. It's just using unconfirmed in the cache until a day later they disappear. This was kind of like a beta test. We launched this 2 years ago, and we'll have a new functionality set up where it'll be more like a Q app. However, like if you can private message anybody on the platform. Like if I wanted to message my dad, who was just here recently, he's in his 70s and on Cordal. This is fully encrypted, 256 SHA, SHA, just like Bitcoin. Algorithm cannot be hacked. Person-to-person messaging, and so this has been around since like the beginning of Cordal, essentially. Sometimes it's interesting when I'm screen sharing this on Zoom, it takes a little bit longer, but see, there we go. So this is one of my accounts. The beautiful thing is this is permissionless, completely open source. So there is no like centralized account, right? Once again, this is blockchain based, the blockchain being completely written from the ground up. So you can create as many accounts as you want, right? All you're doing is creating a new private key. And then the system will actually save all of that only on your machine for you to easily access. It encrypts it, and then you can download a backup onto your machine or throw onto a hard drive or wherever you want. You can see all these addresses here, not a big deal. These are just my public addresses, and then my name. This name here actually is just a name that I've given myself on my local machine. So like if I want to log in here, this is just a local password that I've created on my own machine, so I don't have to know my long key every time. Now I'm in my wallet. This is one of many wallets I own. And so it has a typical wallet where you store your Qort, which is the currency of Cordal. You can also store Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Digibyte, Raven, and Pirate Chain, which is a wonderful anonymous coin. One of the best out there, right up there with Monero, not better. And so, yeah, the wallets will allow you to store these cryptocurrencies on your wallet here, which I do on other wallets. I actually much prefer to store my Bitcoin now on Cordal than I do even on a lot of hardware wallets, because I'm tired of some of that functionality breaking and having to I've had 2 hardware wallets break on me. I won't say what brands. So anyways, it's just more secure, I think, at least easier for me to access. And what's cool about it is there's a trade portal in here. So the trade portal was our first big innovation, well, our second innovation after QChat. And this is a fully P2P trade. We call it a trade portal, not an exchange, because it's really more geared towards trading the currencies back and forth, like almost more in a bartering mentality than like playing a marketplace and trying to day trade and stuff. It's really about being able to transfer between currencies, the currency exchange. And this is all P2P. So there's no intermediary, there's no liquidity pools or any of that stuff. And so these are all all the different combinations of Qort to the different coins. So if you wanted to come in with Qort and buy Pirate, or come in with Pirate and buy Qort, you would go to the R coin Qort, and here you can buy your Qort or sell Qort with your Pirate chain R. And so This is very exciting because this is a way for you down the line, especially as and we'll get into the economy of court, as the true sort of marketplace really explodes. And what I mean by that is in the Q App store, we have very soon here, we're going to have like an Amazon type marketplace someone's developing. We're going to have a lot of different ones because once again, this is all open source. So all these different people are coming in that want to develop stuff. So we have a developer right now working on a really cool kind of Qazon or Q Amazon type deal. We have someone who's working on a farmer CSA type model for farms to provide membership through this. So people would pay with Qort to access their farm goods. And the beautiful thing about this is we're working in the private, right? So this isn't connected to anything out in the World Wide Web. People in Qort don't contract with the mainstream world. And so the idea is that farms can circumvent USDA, FDA, all of that stuff, the licensing, organic licensing, everything, and you just have a direct relationship. It's a very much, if you've heard of agorism, it's like an agorist mentality. So this is the general minting details. So you can see kind of all the statistics. The average Cordal block time is a little over a minute, 72 seconds right now. The average blocks per day, average created Qort per day. It's a very low number of overall Qort out there. Right now, the way you would use it is you can go in and like if there's and this is like Qblog, you like some content, you can tip people Qort for appreciating their content. So support them right here. So let's say Fairphone to be released in the US market. And the community is amazing, David. They're all super awake to all the nonsense. Very keyed in on like the green agenda and the WEF agenda. And so like if I want to hook this guy up, I actually really like this guy. I'm going to hook him up.
What if I'm a video creator and I do, and I load videos, I got different styles of videos. What about me loading some videos up in there and keeping as a repository versus having to keep something over on YouTube or whatever?
So it's the way it works is it's literally hard drive to hard drive. So let's go look at a video right now.
The video is actually stored on my local machine then.
On your local machine. And then you can see where everything that anytime you go in. So I'll show you how websites works real quick. Well, I'll answer your question on the Qblog here. So I didn't mean to exit Qblog. So right now, so yeah, Cordal is very much all about ownership, and it's essentially using something very similar to like IPFS or the original like sort of BitTorrent concept, right? Where you're going to download and host it yourself. And the more people that are downloading and hosting the content, the more resilient and faster it gets. So I know somebody recently posted my Brighteon interview with Mike Adams on here. And I wanted to show you we're streaming a video right on here, how easy it is. It's pretty fast. So what it's doing is it's downloading to your system and then playing while it's doing that. And then you can choose then to delete it after, or you can keep hosting it.
The Cordal Think Tank public chat. So, looks like there were a lot of people that joined in for that.
Yeah, so this is just, see, the whole video's there. So it was
that's about an hour of an hour-long video too.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about buffering and stuff. So, I mean, it's a different way to think of rethinking about how we engage with media, because we are owning it, like we're taking a whole copy of it. But then once again, if you're done with it, you can easily then this is the downloads that I have right now. That's showing me where it is. I can go to my downloads in my node and I can go delete that. So it's like, oh, I don't want that anymore. And we'll make that easier. We'll probably use some UI thing where you have a little X where you can click that out and delete it right here. This is all still very new. So once you've downloaded, watched it, if you don't want to keep supporting it and being now a node, with this. So now I am basically made this more redundant, right? This copy, just like a BitTorrent, right? If you've used any of that, now I've now I have a version that now I have a copy that I'm holding that I'm sharing. So yeah, man, it's really exciting. As you were saying, it's very front facing in terms of us as a solution. You know, this is 8 years in the making. So this is not like something that we just knocked out overnight. That's for sure.
The end of the magic trick that we're all being played or have been educated to believe are real. Again, the education system, the way it's brought, it was developed to get a class of factory workers into the factories, just smart enough to press the button, pull the lever, and press if something goes wrong, but not smart enough to actually take over and develop their own factories. But hey, that's modern education across the planet. It's not exclusive to any country. So anyway, Mike, I appreciate you coming on, and everybody out there, I do thank you also for spending your valuable time. That's one thing that's really incredibly valuable these days is our time and preparedness for things that we see coming down the way toward us pretty quickly. So until next time, bye for now.
Later, guys.